Welcome to Clown World, folks, where the modern American left has turned full-time delusion into a personality trait. You'd think with a stable economy and a secure border, things might calm down, but nope. They're still melting down like ice cream on an Arizona sidewalk. Trump's back in office, and instead of persuading Americans they've got better ideas, the left is busy firebombing Teslas and torching their dealership like it's Antifa's version of Burning Man. And leading the charge from the clown car is Bill Burr, once a rebel with a mic, now just another neutered Netflix shill, flinging desperate one-liners to hook brain-dead leftists on liberal echo chambers like The View. His big gripe? Elon Musk is a nerd who supposedly can't talk to hot women. That's the threat now. Not war, not corruption, just tech bros with bad game, supposedly. Because if you look at Elon's dating history, I think a lot of people would disagree with that statement. But either way, we've arrived at high school cafeteria drama dressed up as political commentary. Masculinity is fascism now, jokes are hate crimes, and owning a Tesla gets you labeled a war criminal, apparently. So buckle up, folks. Let's hit play and watch the cult of contradiction go full meltdown.
Both political parties have incurred your wrath over the many years that you've been doing this. Both sides, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So
I don't know where you're going with this.
So you're bipolitical.
So, you know.
I'm not into politicians at all. They don't make any money. They're set up to be bribed, and in the end, they're all worth like $50 to $100 million. And everybody thinks one side is better than the other. You know, I don't know. It's a weird time, but I just feel like someone needs to bring the boiling water down to a simmer, and everybody on both sides, like if you watch CNN, Fox, you go online, or you listen to politicians, it's all, and then you walk out on the street and someone's like, hey, how you doing? You're like, good. So I don't think they're living in like a reality.
But is there anybody getting your ire up these days more than usual?
Nerds.
Yeah.
The nerds that own the politician.
tech
All these tech nerds that want to build robots because they don't know how to talk to hot women they're gonna take over the world. They're going to take over. They are literally going to replace us. We're like beta right now, and they're coming out with like the VCR.
Bill Burr was once a comedy sniper who took shots at power and has now been reduced to throwing middle school insults from the back seat of The View's clown car. Let's unpack this weak sauce tirade against Elon Musk, because behind the lazy jabs and flailing commentary is a masterclass in projection, confusion, and intellectual laziness masquerading as insight. Now let's start with Bill's big punchline here. He says, Musk is a nerd who doesn't know how to talk to hot women. Hilarious. Until you remember, Elon Musk has been married, divorced, and dated everyone from pop stars to actresses, including having children with some of them. The man isn't exactly struggling to find female attention, but even if he were, what exactly is the argument here? That political influence should be reserved for guys who can rizz up a cocktail waitress? That being awkward negates one's capacity for innovation, job creation, or God forbid, leadership? What are we doing here? Roasting billionaires based on their dating game skill? It's a classic ad hominem attack. Insult the man, not his ideas, instead of addressing anything Musk has actually done, like revolutionizing electric vehicles, overhauling space travel, or dragging Twitter's rotting corpse into a free speech arena. Bill targets Elon's social awkwardness. It's a rhetorical tactic, best known for being used when you have absolutely no substance. You can't challenge Musk on policy, economics, or innovation, so you reduce him down to a caricature. The creepy nerd in the corner of a frat party. It's schoolyard politics disguised as commentary. But Bill doesn't stop at Musk. No, he broadens the attack to all tech nerds, those nerds who want to build robots because they don't know how to talk to hot women. This is pure straw man. He takes the image of a socially anxious coder and blows it up into a dystopian villain archetype, suggesting they're on a mission to replace humanity because they can't flirt. Not because automation increases productivity, not because AI enhances medical diagnostics, not because robotics are saving lives in war zones. No, just because of rejection at a high school dance. And Burr even throws in the lazy, tired argument saying these nerds are gonna take over the world. Really? You're worried about being conquered by the same guys who can't make eye contact on a Zoom call? Sounds less like a reasoned critique and more like a plotline from Revenge of the Sith, Silicon Valley edition. But perhaps the saddest part is watching Burr, a guy who once railed against phony Hollywood groupthink, now spouting the same reheated anti-capitalist tropes while sitting across from Joy Behar. His whole both sides suck shtick was once refreshing until he devolved into the classic lazy centrist trap, blaming everyone equally to avoid saying anything meaningful. Politicians are all corrupt, he says. Great. Got any solutions, or Are you just going to keep on circling the drain and yapping with some vague nihilism? What's even worse, he floats the conspiratorial claim that all politicians are worth $50 to $100 million, implying universal corruption without evidence. Sure, there's corruption in politics. I mean, take Nancy Pelosi for one. I don't see Bill calling her out. But throwing out baseless numbers without names, context, or proof is how you end up sounding like a drunk uncle ranting at Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, people like Musk, who actually put their money on the line to build things and his entire reputation so he could cut back on government corruption, the very thing that Bill is complaining about, get lumped in as part of the real threat to democracy. And let's not ignore the contradiction at the heart of this. Burr hates politicians, distrusts institutions, mocks media narratives, yet he aligns with the same side that wants more government control, more speech regulation, and less accountability for corrupt power brokers. So long as they say the right things and hate the right people. That's not rebellion, Bill. Sitting on The View on Disney, that's selling out with a laugh track. Bottom line, Bill Burr's rant is a sad attempt to claw back relevance by parroting shallow anti-tech populism to a leftist audience that only cheers when you punch right. It's all deflection, all ego, and absolutely zero substance. He's not actually mad. He's mad that Elon Musk didn't ask for his permission.
And I think Elon has got the rockets going because they realize there's other Earths out there, and they're gonna trash this one, and because they don't have any concern for it, and they're gonna move on to the next Earth. And everybody's gonna be standing down here with your blue and red ties, going, "Wait a minute, I was on your side," and they're just gonna leave.
So now Bill Burr is mad at Elon Musk because Elon is building rockets. Yes, folks, we've reached the part of the comedy decline arc where launching reusable rockets and exploring space is no longer awe-inspiring. It's a villain origin story. According to Burr, on The View, by the way, Musk isn't advancing human innovation or opening doors to interplanetary discovery. He's planning an intergalactic hit and run. Trash this Earth, hop on over to the next one, and leave us peasants behind in our blue and red ties, staring up like abandoned fans at a canceled Netflix special. Now, let's start with the obvious. The idea that Elon Musk is building rockets so he can flee a planet he personally ruined is not just stupid, it's lazy. It's a tired narrative ripped from an eco-dystopian fiction that collapses under the slightest scrutiny. Musk's companies, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, Starlink, are all heavily rooted in this planet. The guy didn't just invest billions in clean energy, battery tech, and infrastructure to peace out and ghost humanity from Mars. If anything, he's doing more to future-proof civilization than any of the finger-wagging clowns pontificating from a daytime talk show desk. Burr's entire rant is built on a textbook false cause fallacy because Musk is building rockets and we have environmental problems. Then Musk must be building rockets because he plans to destroy the Earth. That's not logic, that's just bad screenwriting. By that logic, anyone who owns a lifeboat must be planning to sink the ship. And we're supposed to take this seriously because it's coming from a guy who once ranted about population control during a comedy special. Then there's the projection. Burr talks about elites abandoning us while wearing his own designer sneakers on national TV, cashing checks from Netflix, and peddling the same tired nihilism that Hollywood spoon feeds every election cycle. If anyone's gearing up to leave the working class behind, it's the millionaire mouthpieces playing populist while sucking up the corporate media so they can sell their Hulu special. And what exactly is this next Earth Burr is referring to? Is that a real destination, or is this just poetic nonsense meant to sound deep while saying absolutely nothing? There are no Earth-like planets we can reach in the near future, and Musk himself has said repeatedly that Mars will be inhospitable and dangerous for a long time. Colonizing space isn't an escape plan, it's a generational moonshot, a backup drive for civilization, not a billionaire's vacation home. The real kicker, Burr tries to spin this fear-mongering as some sort of everyman insight, implying, hey, I thought I was on your side. Right. You're standing on a multi-million-dollar stage, propped up by the most corporate safe show on television, acting like you're still a regular guy, spitting truth in a dive bar, but your critiques are shallow, your logic is broken, and your populism is fake, and it doesn't connect with the American people. The Republicans are the working class party now, and you're not holding power accountable. You're just sneering at the people who are actually trying to build something. You see, Bill used to punch correctly. Now he just punches blindly. And this latest rant about Elon Musk isn't comedy, it's just pure cope and seethe. It's what happens when the jokes stop landing, so you start pandering so you can keep the checks coming in.
It's going to leave.
Well, you were talking about death in your set. Do they not realize that they're going to die, these people? They don't realize that eventually
Well, I always
everybody
wondered
dies.
that about all religions, where they always talk about a wrathful God and, will send you to hell. And it's like, none of you guys are operating like you fear this, the way you run your religion.
That's right.
So I don't understand any of that. I'm just trying to be like chill. Somebody holds the door. Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. But
So you're trying not to go to hell?
no, I don't believe in that. I don't think we are God's mistakes. Like, why is he mad at us?
He was trying to bring the temperature down before that part.
Yeah, no, I don't understand. Like, God makes sociopaths, pedophiles, and all of that, and then we all have to deal with it, and then it creates crazy people who do other bad things, and then somehow it's our fault. You have to work it out.
But the answer is that the devil creates those.
Yeah,
God
but
doesn't.
Look at you, Joy,
I'm
finding
just
religion.
telling you what they say. The devil made me do it.
But
She's an agnostic.
But God created the devil. That's his responsibility.
Well, that's a good point.
Why does he just get rid of the devil?
And you know what else? God created you, Bill.
Yeah.
Hi, yes, Bill Burr, theologian extraordinaire, lighting up the View stage with a blistering hot take that could have been pulled straight from a Reddit thread circa 2008. What started as a lazy jab at religion turned into a full-blown philosophical tantrum, complete with shallow logic, cartoon theology, and all the nuance of a sledgehammer at Sunday service. Let's go ahead and take the sermon apart one fallacy at a time. Let's start with the foundation of his argument, this idea that religious people don't act like they fear hell and therefore the whole system must be bogus. That's the depth of his critique. If you really believed in this stuff, you'd be running around terrified, which tells us one thing. Bill doesn't understand what religious belief actually is. Faith isn't about trembling in fear 24/7. It's about living with purpose, understanding right from wrong, and accepting that human beings are flawed but redeemable. It's not some cosmic horror movie. It's a relationship with the divine rooted in trust, discipline, and personal responsibility, not paranoia. And here's what Bill clearly doesn't grasp. Christians don't walk around paralyzed by fear of hell because hell in Christian theology isn't some arbitrary torture chamber God throws people into like a cosmic bully. It's not a trap door you fall into for failing a pop quiz on Leviticus. Hell is fundamentally a choice. It's the natural consequence of rejecting God, of choosing to live your life apart from him, and by extension, choosing to spend your afterlife apart from him too. It's not about God gleefully punishing people. It's about God honoring the free will he gave you. See, Christians believe God doesn't force himself on anyone. He doesn't coerce belief. If someone spends their whole life saying, I want nothing to do with God, then God doesn't override that decision when they die. He respects it. He honors the choice. Hell is simply what that separation looks like, complete disconnection from the source of love, justice, and truth. In that sense, it's not punishment so much as it is a logical conclusion of a choice. You don't end up there because God was in a bad mood. You end up there because you insisted on a reality without him, and he let you have it. C.S. Lewis captured this idea with brutal clarity when he wrote, "The doors of hell are locked on the inside." That line devastates Burr's entire premise. The suggestion is that hell isn't a place God gleefully casts people into. It's a condition people choose and cling to. It's the refusal to surrender pride, to relinquish ego, to accept grace. It's not God slamming a door on you. It's you shutting it from the inside because you preferred your autonomy over a relationship. And in respecting your free will, God allows it. So when Burr mocks Christians for not being terrified, what he's really doing is revealing that he doesn't understand the framework at all. Believers aren't scared because they've chosen not to be separated from God. That's the entire point of faith. They walk in confidence, not because they think they're perfect, but because they've accepted grace. That's what makes Christianity compelling to billions of people. It doesn't require fear-based obedience. It invites voluntary relationship. That's also why the whole "you guys aren't acting afraid enough" argument falls apart. It's like yelling at a lifeguard for not panicking in the water. They're not panicking because they know how to swim. Burr's view on religion is stuck in a medieval caricature. Fire, brimstone, angry bearded sky man. But the reality is far more nuanced. It's about love offered freely and consequences respected fully. The irony is that Burr thinks he's exposing something hypocritical about Christians, but all he's doing is exposing how little he understands the thing he's mocking. If he had even a surface level understanding of the theology, he'd know that fear is not the foundation. Freedom is. Not license, but freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to reject, and the freedom to return. return. But Burr doesn't stop there. He slides into the tire trope that if God exists, he must be directly responsible for every evil in the world. Sociopaths, pedophiles, and all. As if human free will isn't a thing. As if people aren't capable of choosing between good and evil. So Burr, in essence, is not only demanding a world where nothing bad ever happens, but also one where we still have the freedom to do what we want. That's not theology. That's a child's understanding of fairness. He wants the benefits of free will without the consequences. He's not actually engaging with the issues. He's just stamping his feet at the universe for being complicated. What Burr refuses to acknowledge, or perhaps doesn't understand, is that God and Christian theology created humanity with a capacity for real freedom. Not the sanitized, superficial freedom of doing whatever feels good in the moment, but the deeper, more consequential freedom to choose the direction of your life, your morals, your beliefs, and ultimately your eternity. That's the dignity God gives every person. He doesn't create robots. He creates people with agency, people who can love, hate, build, destroy, accept them, or reject them. That freedom is so profound, so sacred that God himself doesn't violate it. Not even when it leads to horrific outcomes. Not even when we blame him for the mess we made. And that foundational understanding of freedom, freedom as a gift from God, not a favor from man, is one of the most distinct elements of Christian morality. You don't find it laid out like this in any other religious or philosophical system. Most religions emphasize submission to law, obedience to ritual, or complete determinism. Christianity uniquely holds that God offers love and salvation, but never forces it. He sets the table and leaves the invitation open. The freedom to walk away is not evidence of his absence. It's evidence of his respect for your soul. And that principle, the idea that freedom is not granted by rulers or institutions, but endowed by our Creator, is the bedrock of which America was built. It's written directly into our founding documents. The Declaration of Independence doesn't say governments bestow rights. It says we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that governments exist only to secure them, not invent them, not regulate them into extinction, not trade them like currency for power, but protect them. That was a radical shift in human history. The recognition that freedom is sacred because it comes from beyond the reach of any king, emperor, or bureaucracy. Most other countries begin with the assumption that government is a source of our rights, that you're free to speak, to worship, to defend yourself until the state says otherwise. But America flipped that script. Our Constitution assumes you're already free and the state must justify any restriction on that freedom. That philosophy doesn't come from secular humanism. It comes from the biblical idea that man is made in the image of God with intrinsic value, moral responsibility, and freedom that no government has the right to override. And any government that pretends to offer freedom while rejecting the authority of God is doomed from the start because it can't help itself. It will eventually try to play God. It will centralize power, dictate morality, redefine truth, and call it progress. But it's a counterfeit. A government that believes it grants rights will always believe it can take them. And that is the ultimate betrayal, not just of Christian ethics, but of the very foundation of the American experiment. So when Bill Burr scoffs at the idea of free will, mocks God for not micromanaging evil, and laughs at believers for not living in terror, he's not making a profound critique. He's mocking the very concept that makes his own freedoms possible. The freedom to believe or not believe, the freedom to speak his mind, the freedom to sit on national television and ridicule the God who gave him that breath in the first place. That's not bravery, that's irony. And if he truly understood what he's mocking, he would think twice before confusing ignorance for insight. And then comes his big mic drop. He says, God created the devil, which is supposed to be a big gotcha, but all it proves is that Burr's understanding of theology is about as deep as a puddle in a drought. Yes, according to Christian tradition, God created Lucifer, an angel, not a demon, who was once full of light, beauty, and authority. But Lucifer chose to rebel. That's the entire point. God created him good, and he corrupted himself. His downfall didn't come from design, it came from pride. And that pride is a root of all rebellion against God. Lucifer wasn't content to reflect God's glory. He wanted to be God. He wasn't satisfied being exalted. He wanted to overthrow the very authority that gave him everything. That's the beginning of evil, pride masquerading as enlightenment, rebellion designed as liberation. And it's no coincidence that the same spirit of pride sits at the heart of most modern critiques of Christianity today. I mean, just look at how Burr presents his argument. Not with humility, not with curiosity, not even with a coherent challenge. He mocks, he sneers, and he dismisses something he openly admits he doesn't understand. That's not bravery, that's arrogance wrapped in ignorance. He's not asking questions, he's performing rebellion. He stands in judgment of a system he's never studied, declares it invalid based on surface level impressions, and then tries to land punchlines on ideas older and deeper than anything he's ever written. And this is where things really get insane, because somehow comedians have become the only people allowed in public discourse to speak on the deepest topics: God, morality, culture, civilization, politics, while having zero expertise and often zero understanding. If a politician, a professor, or a preacher spoke this ignorantly, they'd be laughed out of the room. But a comedian, he gets a standing ovation because his ignorance is seen as authentic. His shallowness is mistaken for honesty. And people who are even less informed than he is eat it up like it's gospel. It's the blind leading the blind. And somehow we're supposed to call that brave. It's no surprise that ABC and Disney are the ones pushing this. These are the same institutions that have spent the last decade deliberately misinforming the public, dulling intellectual curiosity, and keeping people entertained enough to never ask real questions. These are companies committed to distraction, to dumbing down the population so they're softer, more pliable targets for the cultural Marxist agenda they're funneling through every channel they control. The goal isn't dialogue, it's demoralization. Replace deep thinking with cheap applause. Replace truth with narrative. Replace God with state. That's the formula. And here comes Bill Burr, once a guy who raged against systems, now unwittingly working for the system he used to mock. He might say he loves America, but he's playing a role, whether he knows it or not, in dividing her and dismantling the moral foundations that made her great in the first place. And I say unwittingly to give him grace. Maybe he really is just that ignorant. Maybe he doesn't see how he's being used. But ignorance isn't an excuse when you have a platform that big. When you're shaping minds, reinforcing anti-faith propaganda, and ridiculing the very freedoms you claim to support, you're not just making jokes, you're participating in a slow cultural suicide. And pretending that's harmless, that's the biggest joke of all. Then Burr asks why God doesn't just get rid of the devil, as if morality means anything in a world where consequences don't exist. If God erases evil every time it pops up, then goodness becomes meaningless. There's no courage in choosing good if evil is never an option. But Burr wants a universe that functions like a preschool classroom. No sharp edges, no danger, and no personal responsibility. But real life doesn't work like that, and faith doesn't claim it does. Even his throwaway line that we're God's mistakes falls apart on contact with reality. If humans are mistakes, what's the standard he's using to judge that? What morality, what purpose, what value? All of these concepts that come from the very religious traditions he's mocking. Christianity. You can't borrow the scaffolding of moral language and then torch the building. If we're just random blobs of cells in a godless universe, then what difference does it make if bad things happen? Why be mad about evil if everything is meaningless? Burr is furious at a moral structure while unknowingly using the same structure to justify his outrage. He wants the righteous indignation of a prophet without the humility or understanding of one. In fact, the irony is so thick it could pass for biblical satire. He's ranting like a drunken Solomon, muttering into the void about the futility of life, angry at God for giving him everything, then blaming that same God for not doing more. Like Solomon in Ecclesiastes, after turning his back on God, Burr sounds like a man who's tasted the blessings of life, wealth, success, influence, and decided to chase pleasure and self-worship instead of honoring the one who gave it all to him. But instead of wisdom, what spills out of his mouth is bitterness and confusion, masquerading as depth. It's all vanity, he implies, but he still clings to moral outrage as if it means something. Like Solomon, when he strayed, Burr speaks as if he's seen everything and found it all meaningless. But unlike Solomon, he doesn't have the clarity or courage to come back to God. Burr mocks God's justice while demanding it. He rejects God's presence while complaining about his absence. He scoffs at truth while standing on it to take aim at others. It's the language of a man lost in the wilderness of his own ego, frustrated that the universe doesn't bend to his preferences. And the sad part is, the more he rants, the more applause he gets from the crowd that mistakes rebellion for revelation and confusion for courage. But strip away the claps, the lights, the curated laughter, and what's left? A man blessed beyond measure, standing on a platform he didn't build, sneering at the God who allowed him to breathe. And that's the tragedy. He could use that platform to wrestle honestly, to ask questions that lead somewhere deeper, but instead he chooses the role of the bitter court jester, mocking things he hasn't studied, preaching nihilism to a room full of people too distracted to notice the contradictions. It's not just intellectually weak, it's spiritually hollow. And if he ever sobers up from the high of applause and surface level rebellion, he might just realize he's been shouting in the dark, angry at the very light that once made him shine. And let's not ignore the context here. This is happening on The View, where spiritual depth is about as common as a conservative guest with a full sentence to finish a question asked by Joy Behar, which in fact she chimes in with, God didn't make evil, the devil did. And the studio audience laughs like that settled the debate. That's the level of engagement here. Daytime TV theology being treated as profound. The blind mocking the faithful while patting each other on the back for how smart they think they sound. This isn't a thoughtful critique of religion. It's a sloppy, ill-informed rant that relies on strawman arguments, pop culture stereotypes, and emotional appeals rather than anything resembling intellectual substance. Burr isn't questioning the faith. He's mocking caricatures of it, then acting shocked when the real thing doesn't match his cartoon version. At the end of the day, this entire bit says more about Burr than it does about belief. It reveals a man who's angry at suffering but too lazy to wrestle with its meaning. A man who sees evil in the world and blames God instead of confronting the darkness in human nature. A man who confuses bitterness for brilliance and applause from a studio audience for philosophical depth. Faith doesn't demand that you never question. It welcomes the wrestle. But what Burr offered wasn't a wrestle. It was a tantrum, a smug, shallow dismissal of something he's clearly never taken seriously. And if this is the best argument he can offer, he shouldn't expect to be taken seriously either. So ask yourself, how do we get here? Where ignorance is marketed as authenticity, mockery is mistaken for insight, and the loudest voices in our culture are the least informed about the things they condemn. At what point did we decide that truth was optional, that faith was foolish, and that meaning itself could be laughed off a stage? The tragedy isn't just that figures like Bill Burr speak this way. It's that so many listen, nod, and never stop to question the emptiness behind the applause. In a world desperate for meaning yet hostile to its source, are we becoming too distracted, too dulled, too proud to recognize the cost of our cynicism? Maybe it's time to stop clapping for the court jesters and start asking why so many of them are being handed the throne. Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace. May God bless you.